It's great to see you. Again, I want to encourage you. There's only 4 people in a table here, and there's 5 there. If you could please, those of you on the edge, just get up. I'll let you leave early, don't worry. You don't get bad grades if you walk out in the middle of the lecture. But we need more people here. It's not going to work otherwise. Thank you. This is a workshop. Again, my name is Daniel Eisenberg. It's a pleasure to be here. If any of you attended my workshop yesterday, it was a 2.5-hour workshop. This is going to overlap about 50%, 60% with the discussion yesterday, so you can decide if you want to attend, but I see mostly unfamiliar faces, which is, I guess, a good thing. So the general topic that I want to talk about today, not talk about, but engage with you around, is cultivating entrepreneurship ecosystems. You can see in the subtitle, there's a slightly more provocative description, which is how to start an entrepreneurial evolution. I published an article in June 2010 in the Harvard Business Review, and they chose the title, How to Start an Entrepreneurial Revolution. And I realized that that word is very sensitive, particularly in this context, and that's why the R is bracketed and the E is bigger. And in reality, it is an evolution and not a revolution in most cases in any event, and certainly not political, it's economic, okay? Just to be very clear. And what we're going to do today is 2 things primarily. Again, in a very interactive format, we're going to discuss what are entrepreneurship ecosystems. It's a word that you've all heard of. It means different things to different people. We're going to try and get some clarity around that together. And then secondly, try and get some clarity about some principles, some do's and don'ts for how to actually cultivate, foster, encourage, enhance, make more robust entrepreneurship ecosystems, particularly in the context, in this context, national and regional context. It's going to be, as I said, very interactive. You're not just going to be listening to me. In fact, probably you'll be listening to each other at least as much as you'll be listening to me. I want to encourage you. It's going to work. We're going to move pretty quickly because there's a lot of things to cover in just an hour and 15 minutes. Probably at the end, we'll be a little bit breathless. I will be. Probably you'll be as well. That's a good thing. I want to encourage you to be open as much as possible with each other and with me, and debate, disagree. That's also a very good thing, because this is very complex stuff. There are no really right answers. There are some better ways to think about these things and some, let's say, worse ways to think about these things. Just a few words about the context that I work and operate within. I'm part of Babson, a subsidiary actually of Babson College called Babson Global, and we set up something called the Babson Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Project 2 years ago. And I've been a venture capitalist, I've been an angel investor, I've been an entrepreneur, I've advised governments, I've been an entrepreneurship educator, I've written, done research, done a lot of different things, but what I've never done before, except for the last 2 years, is tried to intervene in a society and say, how do we actually create more entrepreneurship in a very short period of time? Usually when you see entrepreneurship evolving, it takes 30, 40, 50 years. Question, can we do it in 5? Can we do it in 10? And if we can do it in 5 or 10 years, and we can codify, we can set some methods or some system for doing that, that really is, pardon the phrase, a revolution, because then we can scale it and we can do more of it more quickly, because we think that entrepreneurship, at least of certain kinds, has a lot of benefits to society. So that's our mission. We haven't proven it yet. We do have projects of various kinds, ranging from a week to several years in length so far, around the world. You'll notice that with the exception of my advising Startup America, that all of our work is outside of the United States. It's led to a fair amount of publications. Again, if you go back here, you can write me an email. There's lots of stuff online, lots of stuff on our website. It's been picked up all over the world. Again, we're not successful in proving what we want to prove yet, but we're on the way. And there's a whole suite, please turn off your cell phones, thank you. There's a whole suite of videos we just produced about different aspects of how you actually foster entrepreneurship by impacting the ecosystem. So that's one of two lectures I'm going to give today. And you can realize how difficult that is because I'm a professor and I'm supposed to talk, but I'm going to put you right now into groups. So the first thing I'd like you to do is turn to the people at your table and quickly introduce yourselves. 30 seconds. Just say who you are. Make lots of noise. Okay, I told you I was going to keep this fast-paced and leave you a little bit breathless. I know you haven't finished. That's okay. You can continue to get to know each other after the workshop. So I'm going to give you a couple of puzzles to deal with. I'll give you a little more time for it. Some puzzles in entrepreneurship policy, because that's in a sense what this is all about. By policy, I mean in the very broadest sense of policy. It's not just things that governments make up, but all the stakeholders of a society are involved in shaping policy. So here's my first question. Sounds like an easy one. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Turn to your table mates. We'll spend 6 or 7 minutes just sharing opinions, and please listen as well as talk. Are more entrepreneurs a better thing for society, and why? And don't be afraid to challenge each other's thinking on this. It may be a trick question. Do you want to join? Put me on? Thank you. Okay, again, I'm going to be moving quickly through this. We'll give you more time as we go along, because the questions get more interesting and a little more difficult, as you'll see. But let's just get, who over here would like to just give me one answer to the question, why is entrepreneurship better for society? What? Behind you. Just hold the microphone. This is a quick lesson. Hold the microphone very close to your mouth.
We were talking about entrepreneurship as a state of mind, sort of, a way of thinking. And we spoke earlier about how entrepreneurs tend to be open-minded, and this is a good thing for society. You're thinking about how to change things, if there are problems, how to solve them. And so if there are more entrepreneurs, there are more people thinking this way, and this is a good thing for society.
So because entrepreneurs think differently and think how to solve problems, more of that is better for society. Somebody over here, where's the microphone? Is right there. Someone, yes.
We mentioned the obvious things around job creation, wealth creation, and then something about ratios of entrepreneurs to non-entrepreneurs.
We'll get that in a second.
Not everybody can be one.
We'll get that in next. That's the next question. You're too smart. Somebody over here. There's the microphone runners are going to really be working hard today.
Most of the society suffer from something we call job seeker. Our group think the society will benefit when they transfer the job seeker to job creator.
So it's job creation, wealth creation, not necessarily for everybody, more social problem solving. Anybody have a different perspective?
I think that...
Stand up, please.
Yes, sorry. Entrepreneurs don't accept the status quo, but rather push the boundaries of the ways things are done.
And why is that a good thing?
You move forward. You're not stuck in the
So
same
it's along
place.
with social problem solving, but it implies this word that we heard a lot about this morning, innovation. Thinking differently about things may have something to do with innovation as well. Okay, those are not all the answers, but now for a tough question, which gets to your point over here. Turn to your table mates. The question is, if you have 1,000 working age people, let's say in a village, should you have 1,000 entrepreneurs? Do you want to join? Do you want to join other tables? Would you want to join? Okay, okay. Live? Okay. Again, these are difficult questions. Every table I went to, there's disagreement. Let me just see a show of hands. How many people would answer this question yes? Let's see the hands. It looks to me about 15 or 20%, 25%. How many would say no? Looks to me about 80 or 90%. So you don't buy, those of you who say no, don't buy the thesis that everybody should be or can be an entrepreneur. It's only for some. Is that right? Who said no over here? Microphone. Right here, here. This woman right here.
Thank you. I think entrepreneurial implies a start. So having worked in startups and big companies myself, one sees a different need, a different skill set for individuals to maintain or finish than necessarily the skills needed to start a venture.
So it's a difference, not everybody has the skills that are necessary for being an entrepreneur, and so it's not, when you say of 1,000, so how many of the 1,000 should be, do you think? 1? 10? 100?
I would say let's aim for Pareto.
Sorry?
Pareto, 80-20.
80-20 rule. Okay, let's say, so about 20%. Who said yes, everyone should be an entrepreneur over here? Okay, this gentleman, give him the microphone. Please stand up.
Stand up, that's nice. We think everybody has to be an entrepreneur because it's not about the role, it's about dynamism. So we are not taking a very narrow definition of being an entrepreneur, we are taking a much wider, more as an instinct. And if you have all the 1,000 people exhibiting a lot of dynamism, you will have a very dynamic ecosystem.
So entrepreneurship is not about starting something, it's just about being dynamic. Anybody who's dynamic, like me, sort of running around the stage, is entrepreneurial. What about over here? Do you agree with that? Microphone. Stand up, please.
I come from a neighborhood where all the little kids were entrepreneurs, and each one of the neighbors had something to do. So if we had a neighborhood of 20 kids, all 20 kids in our neighborhood were entrepreneurs. So
what does that mean, entrepreneur?
I just feel just for somebody who takes initiative and does something that he believes or has a dream and an idea and makes it happen.
Is it the same as dynamism?
Being dynamic is, I think, a bit more general. I think it's being dynamic and focusing your energy in terms of creating. Maybe being dynamic is one of the elements that needs to be there. But
so you don't subscribe to the 80-20 rule. You take 100.
No, I think
it's a 100-0 rule.
1,000 entrepreneurs.
1,000.
Yes, yes.
1,000 zero rules. Yeah. Microphone.
Hi. I think that...
Close to your mouth, please.
Sure. I think that if you take 1,000 entrepreneurs that... I believe that there can be 1,000 entrepreneurs. So I believe if you take 1,000 entrepreneurs, they have the opportunity to branch out to maybe other villages, and there's an opportunity to develop, and leaders can be developed and learned. You disagree?
Do I have that kind of reputation already, that if I get close to someone, they think I'm going to disagree with them?
I'm done.
So let me ask you this. About 80% of the people said that not everyone can be an entrepreneur. What do you think that they have, what do you think they have wrong? What do you think they're missing?
The belief in people? The belief in people?
So they're cynics?
Possibly.
All those 80% of the people are cynics? This gentleman here, microphone please. Help out the microphone runners just by raising your hand a little more forcefully so they can see who you are.
Yeah, building on that comment, so if we go back to the basics, one of the fundamental definitions of entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunities without considering resources currently controlled.
Did you go to the Harvard Business School?
No, but I read Professor Stevens' definition. So under that definition, then we can have the 1,000 entrepreneurs because they're going to look for opportunities without looking for the resources they have.
So what do you think all these 80% of the people are missing?
They're missing
They didn't
reading
read Stevenson's book?
Sorry?
They didn't read Stevenson's book?
No, they missed it.
What are they missing? Are they cynical?
No, they're missing the essence of entrepreneurship, I
Oh,
believe.
they just don't understand what entrepreneurship is.
That's
Where is the silent majority? Where are those of you 80% that said, no, not everybody can be an entrepreneur? Microphone.
I'm one of those 80%. I think saying that you want 1,000 people to be an entrepreneur is similar that you say those 1,000 people or the whole society should be artists. I don't think that everyone should be an entrepreneur. However, everyone should have some entrepreneurship skills and aspect even to do their job as an employee. So it's the same thing if you want, the whole society to respect art and understand art, you want them to have some entrepreneurship skills, but not everyone have what it takes to become an entrepreneur.
So it's really, entrepreneurship is part of the human experience, but that doesn't mean that everybody has to do it. But everyone should appreciate it, like art appreciation.
Yes, I just want, I will make just a common ground between the two groups. I think what we all want to say is that everybody can be an entrepreneur, yet not everybody should be an entrepreneur. Some people like to lead, some people like to be inspired by leaders and follow them wherever they go. We try here to make some ratio between how much should be an entrepreneur, how much should be a leader to an entrepreneur. And we decide that every economy just differs. One entrepreneur can hire 900 employee and sometimes take a 50-50 ratio.
That comes back to what someone said over here about the difference between employment and being employed and creating employment. That's what you're subscribing. We'll go on. There'll be more time, I guarantee you. But those of you who said not everyone should be an entrepreneur, not they can't, but should not be an entrepreneur, have to also ask the question, if not, and if it's good for society, how much is enough? What is the right, roughly? I have sort of an answer to that later, but just food for thought. Here's another question to talk about in your groups. Are young people better than older people at being entrepreneurs? There's so much being talked about youth entrepreneurship these days. Does that mean that young people are better than old people? Talk about it in your groups just for a few minutes. Make me live? Thank you. I'm going to ask for another poll, but I'm going to ask it a little bit differently. How many of you, don't raise your hand yet, listen to the question. I'm going to ask, how many of you think that young people are better? How many people think that old people are better? And how many people think it doesn't matter? Okay? So how many people think that young people better? Again, defining young any way you want, preferably 65 and below. How many people think that young people are better? I don't see very many hands. Young in age. You know, it's amazing. There's something, we met 2 months ago at the G20. They have something called the Youth Entrepreneurship Summit at the G20. And yet only 5 or 10 people are raising their hand thinking that young people are better at entrepreneurship. We're going to remember who you are. How many people think that old people are better? This is really depressing. I made the classic mistake of professors by giving you too many choices. How many people think it doesn't matter? By the way, all the research shows that old people do it better. That's the research. Just so you know, just so you know. We'll talk about it later. But the truth of the matter is that what you have done just now is repudiated all of the efforts and all of the programs all around the world, including and particularly in MENA, that think that having young people, there's young entrepreneurship programs, young organizations, YEO, everywhere. Do you see any old people's entrepreneurship organizations? Retired people's organization for entrepreneurs? You don't see those, but you see them for young people. There is an implicit assumption that young people are better at it. And then final question, we don't have to do group work for this. I'm just interested in your opinions. If entrepreneurship is such a good thing, it doesn't matter if you're old or young. A lot of people should be entrepreneurs, whether it's 20 out of 100 or 20 out of 1,000 or 2 out of 1,000. It's such a good thing that leads to so many different positive benefits, both economic and also social benefits. Should government be providing money for entrepreneurs? How many people say yes? How many people say no? No, the question is, should they give them money? That's not the question. This is not about love. This is about money. So again, how many people think that they should? They should. Can I have a microphone over here, please? Please make a strong argument as to why you think government should be giving money to entrepreneurs.
Well, I think there are many good ideas that coming out from people from different backgrounds, and these people might not just, the only obstacle for them might be just only the financing. And in this country in particular, where we actually don't have the knowledge and the awareness in the other institutions that provide that funding, the only alternative is for the government to provide that funding, I think, in my opinion.
How many said no? There's an enthusiastic hand right there. Can we get the microphone to this person? No, not this right here, closer. Yes. Make a strong argument, why not?
It's a no, but it's also a depends.
Okay.
If it's all right. In order to be a true entrepreneur, you have to risk. To receive a gift from the government would be different than to put something down in return for your risk that you truly believe.
About 2/3 of the people raised their hands saying government should give money. What do you think they're missing? What do you think they're getting wrong? Think about it.
I will.
Okay. Anybody else? Over here, microphone, please.
I think most government payments or support to young people is considered in this society as a handout, and it's not really a structured investment. So I think maybe the government should be involved, but maybe use the private sector as a tool to facilitate this kind of...
So that's a more nuanced answer, which says the government may provide some kind of financial stimulus, but not directly provide the money to entrepreneurs, in part because the question is, how does the government select who should receive it and who shouldn't? What criteria should the government or should public policymakers or public program implementers use in order to foster and provide the kind of support, financial support to entrepreneurs?
Good morning, everyone. Imad Al-Jadali from IMC. It depends on the strategic direction of the government. So if the strategic direction of the government to be off oil in the future, then they need to invest more and more on entrepreneurs and the type of the industry that they're going. One of the things that they need to do is not just the money, but the legislations and the licensing, the right environment. Thank you.
So it's not just about the money. It's not just about the money. It's about more than the money. And you're saying that there can be a nuanced approach to providing financial support to diversifying an economy outside of oil, for example.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Microphone, please.
Yes. My point of view, I guess it's really important for the government to have the setup for entrepreneurship, the ecosystem. However, giving money away to people prove to be wrong, actually. You need actually first, if you have a great entrepreneur who's so good in presenting his business concept and he has shown the ability to execute it correctly, I think the money will not be an issue. He will find many people in this room giving him money, wanting to invest with him.
Even in this environment?
Even in this environment, in this specific room, I guess.
That's a very strong statement. What do you think about that? Stand up, please.
Yeah. I think it was a good point, but more important than the money, particularly in this area, is really the coaching, because the entrepreneurs, particular innovation-driven technology entrepreneurs, are doing it for the first time. So what they don't need in the beginning is money. So what they actually need is more advising, is more coaching, since this is the first time activity that they're doing.
So money's not important?
It is, but more important is really the coaching. That's pretty significant.
Microphone. You guys are doing a great job of having a discussion of 200 people.
This is Wael Badawi from Al Qura University. I have been here only for 3 months, but I've been in Canada doing businesses for 10, 15 years. Money from the government is important. We have a say in our venture clubs in Canada. Any good idea with good customer with $1 million on it, it will be a successful business. It will not be a multi-million-dollar business, but it will be a successful business with revenue. Now, when you talk about diversification for a knowledge-based economy from an oil-based or energy-based economy, the stimulus coming from the government is a key. The stimulus comes with money, but the government will not hand you the money. It will set up programs to teach you how you can use this money.
So you disagree with the statement that a good idea, well presented, will attract money?
It will not. There is a 2 minutes rule. There is a 2 rule, which I wrote in the blog for the Youth Foundation. Anybody comes to help you early on has to live 2 minutes away. When you be in a later stage, he can drive to your office 2 hours. Then when you come to be a bigger company, they can fly to you within 2 hours. The local who can help you are the people who know what's the business, what's the problem, and you are not an entrepreneur if you get the same problems with the same solution. You have to see an alternative solution. Nobody else see it as you, and this is what makes you unique and make you the bigger amount of money.
But that's also, and you're saying that's also inherently unfundable because you see something that other people don't see. In other words, they won't see it as a good idea.
Yes, they will not agree it's a good idea. It happened to me 2, 3 times. It happened to Google, to Facebook. You can hear all the stories, even to Steve Jobs himself. it happens. People do not believe in you because if they believe in you early on and they give you the money, they will be ahead of you doing it themselves. That's why the money needed to be from the government to help or foster the early stage of the business.
So Steve Jobs and Larry...
Early on in Apple, he couldn't make it. Even he got the money from Microsoft to badge his company.
Could you just pass the microphone? I don't think necessarily you agree with that.
Just building on the strong statement
stand
that
up,
my
please.
colleague Mazen made about the government should fund the entrepreneurs. I think in an environment such like ours, with the VCs are mostly interested in big tickets, yes, the government should support the entrepreneurs. And I think that the government should support the entrepreneurs unless the VCs and the venture capitalists change their mindset towards the entrepreneurs.
One of the questions I will leave as food for thought for you, which I think is a really critical question, is if government is providing funding, which again, not everybody here agrees with, and I ask the question, direct funding, the question is, should governments therefore be on the balance sheets of ventures? Because the implication of providing funding is that somehow it exists typically on the balance sheet in the form of debt or in the form of equity. We won't address this right now, but it's a very, very fundamental question as who you want as an entrepreneur. Who do you want to be on your balance sheet with you? Because everybody on the balance sheet has a claim of some kind against your assets. Let's move on, because you're starting to talk about environment. Somebody used the word ecosystem. Let's go in and talk about that for a few minutes. And especially through the eyes of the entrepreneur. And here's another question. It's not for group work. We'll talk about it together as a big group. And that is, if you look at this list of challenges that a group of entrepreneurs in some country in the world came up with, where the challenges are, number one, access to capital, especially early stage. Number two, access to key talent. Number three, perception that we don't have a brand like Silicon Valley to attract all these resources. Fourth, access to national media. Availability of a flexible labor pool that can cross boundaries. Affordable workspace and housing, etc. Which location in the world, in which city or in which country did this conversation take place? Was this list generated? Just think to yourselves for a second, and I'll ask you another similar question. A government of a particular country spent 6 months, traveling the country, talking to entrepreneurs, and trying to understand what were the obstacles facing those entrepreneurs. And they came up with 5 answers. The 5 answers were they need help locating talent, they need startup and growth capital, particularly startup capital, they need better sources of ideas, they need access to customers, and they're hindered by government bureaucracy. And now my question is, in which countries, in which locations, in which cities, and there's a right answer, by the way, did these conversations take place? Anybody want to venture a guess? Everywhere, world. It's mostly developed, but mostly developing countries all over. Someone had, you think here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? Any other ideas? Just shout them out. Where did this come from? Detroit, Michigan? Silicon Valley? He says Silicon Valley. What? Sorry? Also everywhere world? Developing or developed? Oh, developing and developed, both. Anybody have a different idea? Which would you say is the most developed, or the 2 or 3 most developed environments for entrepreneurship in the world? Cities, let's say, or regions. The most developed, the most attractive, the most exciting, the most vibrant, the most dynamic, the most successful. Which ones are they? Silicon Valley, of course, everyone says that number 1. Singapore, Boston, Okay. The first list was generated by a highly selected group of entrepreneurs in Boston. And look again at this list. What these entrepreneurs in Boston said was missing: access to capital. Boston, not Saudi Arabia, Boston. Not a developing, I don't think Boston is a developing country, I live there. Access to talent, perception that we're not Silicon Valley, access to media. And this country was the United States. The United States of America. The Small Business Administration spent 6 months studying what entrepreneurs feel are the barriers and their needs. So now I'm going to show you a short video. 5-minute video of an entrepreneur in Latin America. And this entrepreneur, who's now successful, will talk about what it was like starting, what the environment was like for him. And what I'd like you to do is, as you watch and listen to what he says, think about your own environment. And ask yourselves the question, what parts of this are like the environment that I'm in? Most of you are here from the kingdom, but some of you are from outside. What is most like and what is most different from the environment that I'm in? Whoops.
Just a few words of introduction about Passive Corporation, which was founded by Jorge Rodriguez in 1997 in order to provide validation services for the computer equipment and software that drug and medical device manufacturers use when they make their products. Over the years, Passive has diversified into other territories, such as the United States and Europe, usually following its big customers.
I had never heard the word entrepreneurship to begin with, back even in my MBAs. We've always been conquered by someone else, and we just are submissive and we just follow the orders, which is understandable cultural-wise.
It doesn't sound very good for entrepreneurs.
No, not at all, not at all. So definitely for you to take a leap of faith and do something on your own, you're kind of an outcast.
Anybody feel that being kind of an outcast, does that sound familiar, or is that different from, I see some heads nodding and some heads shaking. Anybody feel that that's similar or different from your situation, your environment, your, as we'll talk about soon, ecosystem? Just stand up.
You are an outcast. You are an outcast, but when you're successful, you're revered after that. So.
But when you're successful, you know, as they say, success has many parents.
Precisely, yes.
But risk-taking, we're going to change the saying right here. The saying is failure is an orphan, but we're going to say risk-takers are an orphan. Any other comments? Is being an outcast as an entrepreneur or being somehow stigmatized, is that part of the culture?
It is big time, actually. We're in a society where our parents used to be entrepreneurs. And until we received oil from under the earth, we become all employees. And today, if you are an entrepreneur, it's a stigma. Until you become truly successful, until you generate the millions. So today, if you want to go and get married, they will ask you, where do you work? And if you are sitting somewhere, he will ask you, where do you work? So if you just say, I'm an entrepreneur, he will just say, he's a loser.
By the way, is there a word for entrepreneur in Arabic?
We have different definitions, actually. Ra'id a'mal, we say.
Is that a good? Is that a new word or an old word?
It's sort of a new word, actually.
Is that a good thing or a bad? Does that have a positive connotation?
It's actually, for many people, it's a puzzle. Actually, it doesn't mean anything, actually, for many people.
It's neutral. It's meaningless right now. Yeah. Can we have a microphone here, please?
Hi. I don't think it's being an outcast, but I think, for example, in the 50s and 60s, when the Arab world was booming, there was more opportunity than there was the thought to be an entrepreneur. There was space to bring in other things, and now as the youth generation is learning and becoming educated and leaving the Middle East, and you come back, there's more space to take what has been done and reinvent it or recreate it. So I feel like the youth is more entrepreneurial than the older generation, because as opposed to they're having opportunity or changing this opportunity. So I don't think it's being an outcast. It's just personally, me as an entrepreneur, I find a lot of encouragement from the older generation. And when the younger generation sees that you've become an entrepreneur, they reconsider, do I become an employee or should I do what I really like to do?
Is that a new phenomenon?
I
this
think
encouragement?
I think it's relatively new.
Mm-hmm. So it's changed.
Thanks. Personally, I think the elephant in the room is the risk of failure. The problem is not being an entrepreneur in the Arab world. It's about what happens the moment you fail. We come in a society that is very community-driven, and failure of an individual tends to be the failure of the entire community. And that is the elephant in the room.
So it actually reflects not just on the individual entrepreneur, but it reflects on family, neighbors, community, etc. If the person is quote unquote a failure. So fear of failure and the implications of it may be one of the obstacles, and maybe to some extent that's changing as we see there's more and more opportunity. But we also need a language for expressing that. You'll see in a second here in this interview.
You at the time, how did your family see it? How did your friends see it, or were you like, what was the reaction?
Well, my parents didn't want me to be an entrepreneur or hombre de negocios, as I said, because basically my parents are immigrants.
Were they worried?
They were very worried. They paid our education, higher education back in the United States. We were all professionals, dentists, engineers, finance people, and they all wanted us, they both wanted us to work for someone else so it was safe. Obviously, he loved me and he supported me, but he was very afraid. And he said, why would you start something when you have a secure job in a very large company?
Despite the fact that your father himself owned his own company.
Yeah, that's the ironic part.
He thought that was not a good thing. This is not what I want for my kids.
Right. You don't need to go through what I went through.
Yeah. And what about your friends or other people you knew socially? How did they react to your going off?
Everyone was crazy. I mean, are you crazy? Why are you leaving the safety net? You have a nice job. Even a girl wouldn't like to go be with a person that he doesn't know. It's not something safe. It's not secure.
Yeah. Was there a term for entrepreneurship? What was it in those days? Empresario?
Empresario, but honestly, empresario was not even a much common term.
Yeah.
It was maybe business people, hombre de negocios, something like that. So he wants to get rich for himself, and he exploits his employees. So I opened my bank account with $5,000. And I had a friend of mine who was starting a construction company just kind of the same way, just to take care of himself. And he's basically told me, if you want to borrow one of my bedrooms, we started in an apartment, in his apartment, and he just gave me one of the bedrooms for me to start my office there.
What about the bankers, the lawyers, the accountants, and so on? How did they react to what you were doing?
Honestly, I opened a bank account and I didn't know if I had to be a business account or a personal account. I didn't even get a loan. Well, because there is a lot of underground economy. It could be illegal trading or something. It's not like we are a corrupt state at all, but there is a large underground economy. Yeah, I wouldn't be allowed to deposit those amounts of cash in the bank. A 29-year-old guy walking there with a $170,000 check, and then comes in the next Friday and he has a $48,000. That's kind of weird for them to see a young guy walking in with checks. We have 0 entrepreneurs in our government. There is not one.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they haven't even sold lemonade in their high school stands, with all due respect. For some reason, I don't know what's wrong with politicians. They don't listen much, they talk.
The government isn't the same?
Well, the first job we did, it took 6 months to get paid.
Really?
Yeah, so that's,
is that typical?
They say it's not that bad, so
you increase your prices?
Yes,
basically.
yes.
What are the things that you heard about in doing government business?
Well, it could get shaky. They have a lot of what we call birthdays. So you could have people, politicians, having birthdays 10 times, and they have to buy tickets for the birthday. I mean, it can be, we're extremely elegant, and we don't get into any of that. We need to do any of it, then we'd rather not do business with them.
And venture capital?
None, zero. It's a culture that if you go to the bar and you tell them what you're doing, or you told them you've done this and you failed, which sometimes is good so you can learn and move on to the next, that's embarrassing. If you do that, that's embarrassing, that's not good.
What's your observation about all these support organizations? Do they work well together?
I don't think they do. I think they make a big mess because they don't get it. And again, it's not their fault, it's just nature, it's just the way. You're never gonna get it if you haven't been there and you don't know what the pains are.
That's a description of an entrepreneurship ecosystem through the eyes of the entrepreneur. The factors that are encouraging, conducive to, or inhibitive of entrepreneurship. And this is a map, an abstract way of discussing and developing a common language about what an entrepreneurship ecosystem is. And this map I've developed having been in dozens of countries, talked to thousands of entrepreneurs, policymakers, academics, researchers, NGOs, financiers, multinationals, family groups, large domestic companies, etc. And it turns out that you can describe an environment, an ecosystem, with 6 general categories of things. And these 6 categories, I'll mention them very briefly. Of course, there's policy and leadership, and government is in fact very important. The question is exactly what role government should play in creating the environment or helping to foster the environment that's conducive for entrepreneurship. A second element is finance. And of course, money may or may not be the most important thing at every one point in time, but money is certainly one of the assets that companies need in order to grow. And growth, we argue, has many benefits: job creation, innovation, wealth creation, etc., new products and services. So finance is part of the ecosystem. And there's all kinds of finance. It's not just risk capital, it's debt capital, it's customer financing, it's buyer financing, it's seller financing, there's all kinds. Culture, the stigmas or the encouragement, the fact that you feel that there's more encouragement now, that's part of the culture. The fact that you can see 1 or 2 or 3 or a dozen success stories coming up, that you can identify, people that you think may be like you, that stimulates and inspires more people to become entrepreneurs. So part of culture is the success stories. The support organizations, all the various nonprofit organizations and events such as incubators, accelerators, all of which by themselves may not be very effective, but in the context of an ecosystem are one essential element or one possible element. Human capital, access to talent of various kinds, not just labor pools, skilled labor pools, which is very important, but people who have been entrepreneurs. There's nothing like doing it a second time. People who have been directors of companies and can help others grow. Professional services firms. This is the talent that's needed to make entrepreneurship happen and flourish. And then 6th, markets. Without customers, there can be no business entrepreneurship. Without customers willing to talk to entrepreneurs who are providing new services or products. I'm sure that, how many of you are entrepreneurs, by the way, here? A few dozen of you. You've probably had the experience when you're just starting off. Every door that you knock on doesn't necessarily open, does it? Many of them stay closed. In some environments, big companies, by the way, big companies are the best customers. Why? Because they have more money. They buy more things. But they don't necessarily want to talk to entrepreneurs in some settings, in some environments, in some ecosystems. So that's part of the ecosystem as well. These 6 elements or domains are what we constitute what we call the entrepreneurship ecosystem. When you look at societies and regions around the world where there has been a hotbed, or there is a hotbed, a concentration of entrepreneurship, you see these 6 things have happened. It doesn't mean that somebody sat down with a nice piece of paper and Microsoft PowerPoint and drew an ecosystem and then designed it and got all the boxes. Usually, in fact, it's never worked that way. But over time, these 6 elements evolve together and interact with each other. I want to, because we're running a little bit short of time, and we started late also, I want to jump right ahead and talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been learning about mistakes that policymakers and public leaders, and by public leaders I don't necessarily mean elected or appointed government officials. Public leaders can be private sector leaders as well who take a civic role. And there are many of those in this society and other societies as well. So the mistakes that these public leaders made, we've been accruing and learning, and also the principles, when it does work, the principles for actually how to go about fostering the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And as you'll see, next to every mistake, there's also a flip side, which is a principle of what to do. And one of the biggest, most fundamental mistakes is the confusion between small companies and entrepreneurship. You heard what Jorge Rodriguez said. His father was a small businessman. They manufactured shirts in the Latin American country they were in. But he's a small businessman. The whole family worked in the business. In fact, they lived on the top floor, and the business, the shirt manufacturing facility was on the bottom floor. But what did his father tell his son and daughter? His father told them, I don't want you to be entrepreneurs. I want you to have good, safe jobs. I don't want you to have to go through what I went through. Not always, but typically, that's what small business owners convey and self-employed convey to the next generation. Entrepreneurs, on the other hand, convey to their children, their friends, their relatives, entrepreneurship is something good. It's challenging. It gives you a sense of mastery. It can create wealth. It's something that's respectable. Entrepreneurship breeds more entrepreneurship. Self-employment does not. And one of the big mistakes that public leaders make around the world, including the United States, we have something called the Small Business Administration. You know, if there's something that entrepreneurs hate, it's they hate the word small. Entrepreneurs do not want to be SMEs. And I realize that's maybe a controversial statement because most countries around the world have special SME programs, and what they oftentimes mean is entrepreneurship. But what SME connotes to the entrepreneur is an S who wants to be an M, and then an M who wants to be an E. Being an SME is like being a teenager. It's something that you want to get through very quickly because it's painful. They aspire. Entrepreneurship is about aspiration, and it is part of the human experience. So that's one of the big. The second is emulating Silicon Valley. If you go to a website called siliconia.org, you'll see dozens and dozens and dozens of examples of Silicon Glen and Silicon Bog and Silicon Forest and Silicon Wadi and all these silicons. You cannot be Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley could not be Silicon Valley if it wanted to today. You have to be who you are. And that's an essential mistake that's made. Third is letting government drive the process. Government has an extremely important role to play in terms of facilitating, convening, catalyzing, stimulating a process by which private investors can discover that it's profitable investing in entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs can discover that it's profitable for them to take some risk. But that's different from letting government lead the process. Government can initiate and stimulate, but it has to very soon start getting out of the way. To some extent, not completely. An overemphasis on the concrete manifestations of entrepreneurship. Clusters, incubators, accelerators, angel networks, all of those can be good things, but only in the context of a culture and the context of availability of capital, and the context of good regulation, the context of access to customers, but by themselves, they are just buildings or titles or edifices. In fact, just to give you an example of angel, and I've studied these all over the world, angel networks as policy tools. Angel investing is a great thing. I do a lot of angel investing myself. It's very important. It's an essential element of the entire ecosystem. But there's no evidence that angel networks, as angel networks, are an effective policy tool, because they're often thought about in isolation of everything else. Telling entrepreneurs where the opportunities are, selecting winners, deciding on sectors that entrepreneurs should be incentivized to enter into. You can't tell entrepreneurs where the opportunities are. Someone said that entrepreneurs are contrarian, that they're looking at value, they're seeing value where other people don't see it. That's something that has to be encouraged. In fact, one of the elements that's inherent in the process of entrepreneurship is surprise. Entrepreneurs are always surprising the market. That's what they do. That's where the value is. If they're doing something that isn't surprising, there's no value being created. But also in the process of surprise, that means they're doing something that other people think is not as valuable as they do. That's the essential conundrum of entrepreneurship, the essential dilemma. Let me just go on and end with a couple of principles, because as I said, all of the principles are flip sides of the mistakes. But first of all, it's essential to target high potential, high growth, high ambition entrepreneurship. Maybe everybody has the potential for that, maybe. But a few will succeed. That's essential. And it's not everybody who will be successful, but it can be everybody who can aspire. Set specific objectives. It turns out that a very small number of real successes will have a stimulating effect in creating a tipping point, a virtuous cycle. And getting to those initial successes is an essential process. Once that happens, things tend to take over by themselves to some extent. We have something called a 1 out of 100,000 rule. If there's one successful entrepreneurial venture for every 100,000 people in a given city or region, it tends to kick in to become a virtuous cycle. Third, grow your own. You have to experiment. You have to make mistakes. You have to try things out for yourself. And that means letting the entrepreneurs drive the process of discovery. The entire ecosystem. Not take an isolated approach. Take a comprehensive, holistic approach. Again, when you see this being successful around the world, you see many things happening together. And that's very important. It's important also as a mindset, because as a mindset, the ecosystem is something that is relatively self-sustaining. That's what an ecosystem is. It's not just a bunch of things. It's a bunch of things that tend to adjust to each other and adapt without the visible hand guiding it or pushing it too much. And that mindset of creating something, fostering something that then can take over by itself. So I really like that comment about finance. Government can play a very important role in stimulating private sector investors to discover that it's useful, beneficial to be involved in entrepreneurship. And then it takes off by itself. That mindset is critical. This I already mentioned. I think it's essential over time for government to stay off of ventures' balance sheets. Government has very important priorities. One of them is not to claim the assets of a venture on whose balance sheet it exists or is represented. That's essential because it creates conflict of interest. Nevertheless, it can happen for short periods of time as long as government understands that it should very quickly get off the balance sheets, because its role is not to make money. Its role is to stimulate the actors of the ecosystem to learn that it's profitable, useful, beneficial to engage with each other. And that leads to self-sustainability of the change. And that's the essential message of the ecosystem strategy as we've been implementing it in cities and small countries around the world, is that it's self-sustaining. That if you can succeed in making it happen, it tends to take off and feed itself. I agree completely with all the comments that were made earlier. Entrepreneurship has multiple benefits. And as Victor Hugo once said, there's no army more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I think, as we've seen some evidence here, entrepreneurship is an idea whose time has come. And I think when it comes, and as it comes, and it is coming, it's coming to all regions throughout the world, it will have a beneficial impact, and we can all play a role in creating the conditions to make it happen more, faster, and better. And with that, I will end my presentation and end our workshop, and thank you very much for participating.